Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Andrea Milan from the Global Center for Climate Mobility. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're just going to wait for one more minute and then we will get started. Thank you for your patience. So good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure seeing many of you connected today. So this is the Global Center for Climate Mobility's second quarterly webinar. And in this quarterly webinar, we would like to look into regional dynamics. In our first webinar, we looked into the Greater Caribbean last quarter, as we launched the Greater Caribbean Shifts, our flagship report on climate mobility in the Greater Caribbean. And in Q4, we thought about the Mediterranean, both because there's a growing interest in climate mobility issues, especially at city level in the Mediterranean. And today it's Mediterranean Day. So it's a great day to hold this discussion. So the idea for this webinar is to also think about the role of cities. The reason for that is the Global Center for Climate Mobility's Academy. We created it to bring together different communities of practice into an ecosystem. And we created it a few months ago, and we decided to start with youth as the focus of our work to bring actors together. And as we move towards 2026, we want to keep working extensively with youth, but we also want to start looking at cities as a second key constituency that we think plays a key role. And so I'll let my colleague Salma later on present a little bit more in detail the idea of the panel discussion. But before that, I would like to warmly welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Ashok Adicéam, who is Executive Director of Mission Neptune, among the many, many accomplishments and tasks he's worked on in his career. And he's a great partner of the Global Center for Climate Mobility. We're very thankful for this. And when we thought about this webinar, we immediately thought about him for two reasons. The first one is almost anecdotal, if you allow me. The first time I had the pleasure of meeting Ashok at the UN Oceans Conference in Nice in June, This was the end of a very long process he had been very central to. And the first time I met him, the interesting thing is normally at the end of such a heavy, complex process, you hear anybody who's been at the heart of the organization, and the first thing they tell you is like, "This is the last event I ever organized. We're so exhausted." Instead, all he did was speaking about, so what's next? So that was seen by many, many people as a landing point, and he just framed it as like, we're starting today. And so we thought we wouldn't have a practical webinar with like city examples. We rather thought we want to have a higher level focus and discussion. And so we thought he will bring the great vision we know he has for us. And then the second reason is that for us at the Global Center for Climate Mobility, and especially the Academy, building bridges is absolutely key. We could not think of a better bridge builder in the Mediterranean space than Ashok. So Ashok, it's a pleasure for us to count on you as a close partner. And thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. Without further ado, I'll pass the floor to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being present. I see many colleagues I know and many I don't know. Is it okay to continue in English? I guess yes, which is the language which joins us together. Although French is the language of diplomacy, and that's what I do. I'm a French diplomat, and you're right. And I thank you for your introduction. So many kind words, Andrea. My role as a diplomat is to create bridges, sometimes be the bridge itself, and to allow ideas and people not only to meet, but to collaborate, to create, to collaborate. And I must say that what the Global Center for Climate Mobility is doing, what Professor Kamal Amarkan and his team, including you, Andrea, is wonderfully doing is to create something with that sense of urgency, because, for instance, sea level rise, which is one of your, the coalition that you're carrying is one of your new activities, is dealing with existential threats and existential questions. And I am quoting Kamal. And what's joining us this afternoon, all of us, about the Mediterranean is exactly the same kind of urgency that brings us together. And in your different capacities, expertise, all of you are really contributing to, I would say, two things. First, to address the challenges, the threats, and the disastrous health of the ocean in the Mediterranean. And at the same time, you have, wherever you are, including in the European aspects of things, EU aspects of things, and different countries also which are here, considering that the Mediterranean can be la Méditerranée exemplaire. La Méditerranée exemplaire, to speak French. Someone has asked me French, but I'm not sure that everyone would understand if I switch into French. Mais la Méditerranée exemplaire is, the Mediterranean is exemplary because, sorry, I'm reading the messages at the same time. I think Uganda, you want me to continue in English. So Andrea, you tell me what to do. I'm fluent in both.
English is perfect. Thank you.
Ce qui est exemplaire dans la Méditerranée, what is exemplary in this Mediterranean, is this dialogue of cultures, which is at the heart of the bridges that we can build. Le dialogue des cultures is also speaking about bridges. One dimension that we tried at UNOC to do is to work on the interconnectivity, the connectiveness from the Gulf itself. I can see my friends from Yemen here. I was recently in the Emirates, and earlier in the year went to Saudi Arabia and to Bahrain. The interconnectivity from the Gulf till the Mediterranean is something that we have to have in mind when we speak about the Mediterranean as une mer exemplaire. And that's the only way, I think, that we can address the challenges, the disastrous health, let us be very frank, of the ocean of the Mediterranean, because the Mediterranean has been exemplaire, has been an example for this dialogue of cultures, which is, in other words, the dialogue of commerce. Marco Polo is the story of commerce and also of culture. We are so lucky to have in the Mediterranean champions of the ocean. For instance, the maritime transport. For instance, CMS EGM, and I'm not saying this because they're French. And you have others. You have in Malta, you have in Cyprus, you have actors who are part of this exemplaire Mediterranean, which are leaders, who are leaders. I went to Malta recently, and they are really trying to build a bridge of today to address the challenges. And part of the challenges, speaking about dignity, which is something very dear to Kamal, very dear to you, Andrea, the dignity and mobility. Of course, the Mediterranean is also this tragedy of every day, speaking about migrations, and this cannot be avoided in our discussions. Just why I would like to, by reminding this aspect of and which is a dialectical aspect of the Mediterranean, which is in a disastrous situation and has at the same time this responsibility, which is the historic responsibility of the Mediterranean for commerce and for this dialogue of cultures, the richness of the south of the Mediterranean, the north of the Mediterranean, and this interconnectivity which goes till the Gulf. This gives a particular, I would say, frame and responsibility to each and every one of us to address those challenges with hope, with determination, and being very pragmatic. I'll just finish, Andrea, if it's time for me to close and to start the discussions, which is more important here, to say that and congratulate you, the GCCM, for having been a major actor at UNOC, the UN Ocean Conference, which we organized. 65 head of states and governments, more than 100 countries represented. 65 head of states is two more than the COP30 in Belém. So this was not even a COP, but we had two more head of states. And that was really part of our brief. And you're right to say it was 2.5 years of mobilization. And what I was saying is you were part of an important part of this UN Ocean Conference. We created these three UNOC special events. One was we brought 2,500 scientists from the world over for 3 days during the One Ocean Science Conference. We invented with Monaco the Blue Economy and Finance Forum, which brought 1,500 stakeholders from the economy, from the finance, in to Monaco with specific outcomes, more than 10 billion euros new money invested and announced there. And we did with the city of Nice, the state of France, and a lot of cities and partners and even states throughout the world, this Ocean Rise and Coastal Resilience Summit. And we worked on this with you, GCCM, and you have carried the baton from there, and you are the secretariat of this Ocean Rise and Coastal Resilience Summit. So what is it? If you allow me to close, Andrea, with this. The Ocean Rise and Coastal Resilience Coalition has 4 objectives. One was to organize international cooperation among coastal territories. 2 is to facilitate access to scientific knowledge and adaptation engineering, particularly for vulnerable regions. 3 is to mobilize new financial and insurance instruments adapted for local governments. I'm sure all of you, in your capacities around the Mediterranean, you are close to this topic. And 4 is to promote the representation of coastal territories within the multilateral processes at the UN. That's what you did, GCCM 2 years ago, and in also different COPs, and that's what you did recently, Andrea, in Belém. So I think it's maybe a way to close. It's an opportunity for cities in the Mediterranean, countries in the Mediterranean, to join this coalition of cities facing sea level rise and to work. I can see some colleagues, Maharaj Muthu from India, to work with all the territories in this existential threat, which is sea level rise, which is affecting the Mediterranean, but affecting the Mediterranean at the same time as the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and so far and so forth. So thank you, GCCM, for working so precisely on topics. You have a very specific menu, and thank you for having this regional approach, which is only more practical, pragmatic, and mobilizing these great partners that you have brought around the table, Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashok. And your intervention reminded me of the fact that I had a great history teacher. I'm from Sicily myself, so the heart of the Mediterranean. And he used to joke that if they didn't find America, we would be the heart of the world, right? Because the Atlantic, became the center. But I remember thinking in Nice, perhaps, there was just a great vibe, a great feeling of like we're moving forward, there's action. The Mediterranean, however, has a history of dialogue, a history of youth empowerment, and just the proximity, not just the Mediterranean, but as you rightly point out, also the Gulf. And in Nice, I had the impression being in the room when the Ocean Rise and Coastal Resilience Coalition was the summit and when the coalition was announced, that really the Mediterranean is and can be the motor of what is a global movement, as you highlighted. So I'm really thankful for the work that you, Ashok, and team did in Nice, catalyzing action. And I'm happy to pass the baton to a fellow Mediterranean, in fact, and my colleague Salma Hassan, who is our youth program coordinator, who will moderate the panel. Thanks again, Ashok, and over to you, Salma.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andrea, and thank you very much, Mr. Ashok, for the insightful remarks. And I would like to thank everyone for being with us today. My name is Salma Hassan. I'm the Youth Program Coordinator at the Global Center for Climate Mobility. I'm also from Egypt, as Andrea mentioned. Half of my family is from Alexandria, so the Mediterranean is also a big part of me. And I'm so delighted to be here with you on the occasion of the Day of the Mediterranean to moderate this panel on climate mobility, coastal city resilience, and youth leadership in the Mediterranean. As we know, the Mediterranean region faces increasing pressures from climate change, from rising sea levels to extreme weather events, which directly affect communities and urban resilience. At the same time, young people and local stakeholders are playing a critical role in driving innovative solutions and fostering cooperation across cities. So today we will hear from distinguished set of speakers who bring expertise from regional programs, research, and youth-led initiatives on how Mediterranean cities can adapt to these challenges, how it can support mobility in the context of climate change, and empower communities, especially youth, to take an active role in shaping sustainable and resilient futures. Before we start, just some housekeeping rules. I would like to ask everyone to keep the mics muted. We are going to hear first from the panelists, and if you have, pardon, yes. And we will hear first from the panelists, and we will have space. We will have space also for Q&As at the end. Before we start, I would like to briefly introduce our panelists. So today we have with us Ms. Juliette Samman, Research Lead from Samuel Hall. We have also Mr. Martin Heibel, Communication Manager from Interrega Next Med Program. We have Ms. Ines Duarte, Project Manager, Energy and Climate Action Division from the Union for Mediterranean. And last but not least, we have Mr. Youssef Aroog, who's the co-president of the Board of Trustees at Mediterranean Youth Foundation for Development. With no further ado, I would like to start by asking Ms. Juliette Samman from Samuel Hall, what are the key challenges and opportunities for coastal cities in managing climate mobility, and how can these insights inform policies and local actions? Maybe you can take us also briefly about what the role of data and research, what kind of role it can play in guiding local authorities and communities in the Mediterranean to enhance the resilience in the region. Over to you, Ms. Juliette.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much for this opportunity to discuss the topic. I will share a brief presentation. I hope that it will answer the different points that you asked. Let me. Great. I hope that you're seeing the screen correctly. Great. So I will focus my intervention on North Africa, and I will talk about material and immaterial factors that influence climate mobility. This is based on a research that we conducted at Samuel Hall for Oxfam in Morocco and Tunisia from last May to August. So with data collection in June 2025, and it I think contributes also to answering the question of how can research and data contribute to this question. So the research explored climate-related loss and damages with a gendered lens to focus on how they are experienced and understood by communities. We collected individual and collective stories by conducted focus group discussions and semi-structured individual interviews in each country. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a bit. So what our findings show is that the understanding of this link between socioeconomic factors, exposure to climate change, and migration decision requires to include other elements as well, such as affective and identity factors, but also structural injustice and structural inequalities. Based on this, we propose to look at the 3 dimensions that you see here to understand vulnerability and vulnerability factors that influence migration decision in relation to climate change. So first, socioeconomic factors rooted in structural injustice. So this means we look at livelihoods, quality of life, etc., but also at socioeconomic determinants, access to democracy mechanisms, civic rights, and others. Then we look at climate vulnerability, so how exposed an individual or a group is to climate-related risks, including disaster and slow onset events. And finally, sociocultural factors, including relationships, relationship to people, relationship to places, symbols, and identity. So we look here at more the immaterial elements of life, which may play a role in individual dreams. And combined, these elements contribute to the economic and non-economic loss and damages that we assessed for this research that I mentioned. They also contribute to social valorization or devalorization, and all of these play a role in migration decision. So there is no direct causality between the different factors and migration decision. There is no recipe or mix of factors that would be associated to a certain decision. But what we saw is that the decisions to leave, to stay, to return are informed by dreams and by opportunities that are influenced by economic and structural injustice, by climate vulnerability, and by social meanings. To illustrate this, I propose to look at a few stories from my research that show that indeed this relationship between the factors and decision is complex. And the quotes on the slides that I will present now are based on participants to focus group discussions who responded to the question, do you think you will remain here regardless of any climate change or disaster that may occur? And they are accompanied by a visual representation with the same symbol that you see here of the element noted by the respondents in their quotes. So this first quote is from a 38-year-old woman from Taroudan in the region of Agadir in Morocco. She's married, she has a university level education, and she works as a public officer. What she says, and in a shortened version, you have the full quote here, is that if a major disaster were to occur, we would be forced to leave. That said, I would prefer to live in a city I know with its networks, habits, and landmarks. So while her response is hypothetical, it shows that for her, climate events, not the risk, but the occurrence of an extreme climate event, could push her to leave, despite the two other dimensions being relatively positive. But she also clearly said that this wouldn't be a happy choice. So that's why we put here forced migration. The second response is also from a woman from Taroudan. This one is 28 years old. She's a widow. She's the mother of 3 daughters, and she has primary level education. She says, I am both mother and father to my children, and I bear all the responsibilities alone. I currently live in my own house, which gives me a certain stability. For all of these reasons, I prefer to stay here, even though the climate situation is deteriorating. Her testimony highlights that for her, the social responsibilities, the attachment, she talks about it later in the quote, and the economic factors are more important than climate risk in her decision and would actually push her to stay. Again, this is limited. We are talking about people who are staying, so it wouldn't predict the way she would actually act, but that's how she prioritized things in her in the conversation. Finally, we have a quote from a man from Tataouine in Tunisia. So he is university educated, he's single, and he's between 25 and 35 years old. He says, the only reason that would make me leave is a financial one, because in truth, the salaries here are very low, and I think if I moved abroad, I wouldn't return, but I would still feel a responsibility towards my hometown and would try my best to support my people here. Although the question focused on climate-related factors, he does not mention climate at all. What's interesting here is that there is this push and pull dynamic between the economic factors and social meanings, and it leads to a potential transnational aspiration associated with a desire to live. It connects to the question of bridges that were talked about before. So what does all of this mean? So what it shows is that the vulnerabilities and the factors that influence whether people move, stay, or return from our research are dynamics. They include social, cultural, and economic dimensions, in addition to that would contribute to how they would behave in front of climate risk. The way they intersect with dreams and migration decisions in face of such risk is rooted in their individual experiences and in structural inequalities. So what does that mean for policymakers? We can draw several conclusions. First, it's not just about livelihoods. So understanding the affective and structural dimension of life, including urban life, is necessary to understand climate mobility. Second, it's not just about climate, but also about structural factors such as democratic mechanisms, political and industrial accountability. And third, it's necessary to build and support coalitions with civil society actors who currently fill a gap with limited support. This means concrete action. So for example, building a coalition. Samuel Hall is building the Purple Coalition on Climate Change, a feminist coalition that centers care work, mobility, grassroots feminist leadership. This is also a bridge that can be made between different types of actors, whether they're local, community-based organizations, research organizations that can also contribute to building bridges with or between them, policymakers. So a lot of actors can enter this conversation. So for policymakers, we recommend that to complexify the approach to climate mobility by also considering non-economic factors, by politicizing their action and tackle structural factors, and by supporting civil society action, not to impact migration decision, because that's not how we see it work, but to ensure that the decisions, regardless of what decision it is, allow for dignified life, coming back to the question of dignity, and develop individual agency. I will stop here and happy to continue the conversation later on in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Juliette, for the insightful presentation and for highlighting also the structural factors that affects the decision for mobility. It's not just about climate, but it's part of a bigger context. Thank you very much for your input. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Martin Heibel and ask him, how does the Interrega Next Med program foster cooperation among Mediterranean coastal cities? And how does this cooperation help make the region more sustainable and more climate resilient? Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Salma. It's a very complex and broad question, so I'll do my best to answer it. By the way, happy day of the Mediterranean to all of you. Good afternoon and greetings from sunny Sardinia. I'm actually based in Sardinia, so seeing the beautiful Mediterranean light every day, and I think it's good for the mood to live under and to live in our beautiful region where, by the way, we do not lack of common challenges, and I think that this is a bit the impetus of our program. So behind the branding, behind the name, behind the Interreg Next Med, we are a platform, a big cooperation platform, which has been around since 2007. It's funded by the European Union, and we're working across the whole Mediterranean region, encompassing 15 different countries, 7 EU member states, and 8 partner countries from the southern shore of the Mediterranean area. And our common goal is really to turn shared challenges into common solutions. So we work on a multi-thematic approach, which of course, since the Mediterranean area is also host of some major cities, and cities actually tend, of course, to concentrate many socioeconomic, environmental, and social challenges and issues. This is also where our action and our funding are directed to. So since 2007, we've been lucky enough to fund over 150 projects involving over 1,000 organizations. So also, as Andrea was highlighting, what makes the Mediterranean area unique, and this is not just about coastal cities, it's about the momentum that Mediterranean stakeholders are able to create when there is a challenge to be addressed. Again, we are lucky enough, we have so many different challenges across the Mediterranean area which are shared, and we've been able to witness that you know, there is an appetite for cooperation. There is a huge will really to develop cooperation network and to work and to progress together around shared challenges. I mean, our budget, for instance, is just a little over 250 million euro, which is never enough to tackle all the issues we have in common across the Mediterranean area. And what actually Euro-Mediterranean Partnership is asking us in terms of project proposals is actually over 3 billion euro. So you can see that notwithstanding the very complex situation in the Mediterranean area and the tensions and the conflicts that are happening, and in some cases, very volatile and evolving situations, still the stakeholders, the institutions, the civil society, and also the private sector is really able to mobilize. So over the year, again, we've been lucky enough to work with a lot of different cities. So here you can see on the map, this is where actually we work. So we've been able really to support at the pilot scale because, I mean, our financial means are very limited in light of the many challenges that needs to be addressed across the Mediterranean area. But my messages are very positive. When stakeholders unite forces, really we can reach out, we can reach and achieve very important results. So we've been lucky enough to work with cities like Alexandria, Marsa Matruh in Egypt, Sousse, Madias Fax in Tunisia, Beirut, Genova, Palermo in Italy, Thessaloniki in Greece, and now we are further engaging with new cities like Izmir and Oran, Algiers, and Antalya. So there is a demand for stakeholders from both shores of the Mediterranean to work together and to address jointly common challenges. How we've been able to support climate resilience in urban areas, of course, our action extend also to rural area, and I think this connection, and I think this is also a focus of the work of your organization, of the Climate Mobility Center, is also to understand the connection in terms of mobility of people between rural and urban areas, and of course the mobility across the Mediterranean Sea. So, but we've been really able to support these municipalities, not only in terms of funding. I think that funding is really a starting point for us, and funding are never enough, not only in terms of delivering and supporting and exchanging and providing expertise for local decision makers to better plan climate resilience plans at a local level. I mean, expertise is always needed, funding are always needed, but I think really what has been a game changer for us is when you test real scale solutions. This is very important, that behind policy development, actual solution, technical solutions are being implemented, even at pilot scales, because this will help raise the awareness of citizens about the issues that are existing at local level in urban context, but also for decision makers really to mainstream the solution. What is important in our case with limited funding is really to showcase that solution exists and how they can be transferred and mainstream into local policies, and actually also try to build a momentum where there is among territories, among cities, positive, we always like to use that concept of positive contamination. It's good to go and to support municipalities, coastal municipalities, to improve their capacities in terms of climate resilience. What has been working very well in our case is peer-to-peer learning between municipalities from both shores of the Mediterranean, exchanging information. Peer learning is also proving very efficient. So based on these good results, we are continuing our support to coastal cities, coastal municipalities across the Mediterranean area. We are creating actually a special funding, a platform to support multi-level cooperation at city level through what we call governance projects, where we are trying to support a qualified and lively dialogue between citizens, the civil society, and municipalities, local authorities. So priorities in terms of climate resilience are shared and are basically decided. The actions to be implemented are decided together. So this is also a very important approach where the voices of the civil society, the needs of citizens, of the private sector, of the stakeholders are taken into account, because we are creating platform where there can be an exchange at local level, but also at transnational level, where cities from the south and the north of the Mediterranean area can also work together on shared challenges. So active citizenship actually is really being fostered by the climate impact in Mediterranean cities. So we have plenty of projects that are running. We have plenty of interesting projects. I mean, our program is really a laboratory to see what is needed in this momentum. What's the demand from the territories? What's the demand from the local decision makers? What do they need really to advance climate resilience in urban context? So we have a lot of projects in this moment working on the deployment of nature-based solution, green infrastructure to be and to include climate resilience in cities, of course, to counter the heat wave effect, that kind of issues. A lot of projects dealing with green roof, increased vegetation. We are covering buildings with green walls, and also we are using these green walls actually for water treatment. So nature is there, and also projects which are taking stock of the EU mission Ocean and trying really to implement that momentum at local level, at city level. So like, for instance, the city of Genova in Italy is really leading on this. Looking ahead, we are currently finalizing the appraisal of proposals that have been submitted, because our program works through calls for proposal, so proposals that have been submitted for a call entirely dedicated to the green transition with a budget of over 80 million. And also thanks to the collaboration with the Climate Mobility Center, we have introduced in our terms of reference this concept of climate mobility, which in my opinion, when you engage with the stakeholders at urban level, at local level, is still a novel concept, but thanks to the dialogue with Andrea, besides all the questions and issues that are related to disaster reduction, disaster management, so our cities really can better address this kind of extreme weather events, building their capacities and also building tools, building expertise and building solutions, also understanding and providing as many evidences as possible to decision makers about this issue of climate mobility, climate-induced displacement. So we're also increasing our focus on this specific topic, integrating the link between climate change and human mobility in local policies. So we are raising awareness of local decision makers about this issue, strengthening data on climate-related displacement, and really helping stakeholders to develop adaptation strategies, always in partnership with civil society, with stakeholders, with universities. So trying also to create robust ecosystems in city where expertise is available and forces are being clustered. So for us, we always see the Mediterranean area, the Mediterranean Sea, as a region of opportunities, as a very positive region where any kind of shared challenges beyond the challenge of climate change can be turned into a common opportunity, into a shared solution. So we are really pushing for our region to increase its capacity for climate adaptation, climate mitigation, and also, of course, supporting coastal cities. So they remain a place of opportunity, sustainability for the generations to come. So very quickly, this is how we work. So since today is the Day of the Mediterranean, just wanted you to scan this QR code. So for today's occasion, we've built a common playlist of Mediterranean songs. We've asked our followers on social media, what's the song for you which best represents the Mediterranean area, its culture, its food, anything. So we have a beautiful playlist today available on Spotify. So feel free to listen to it, enjoy, relax, and thank you very much for this invitation.
No, thank you very much, Martin, for bringing the spirit of the Mediterranean actually to the conversation. And thank you very much for taking us to the operational level of how can we work together and the practical solutions that you are supporting. And you mentioned that you are now including climate mobility in your work. But on behalf of my colleagues also, I would like to say that your contribution to us and your participation in the different convenings, especially the Climate Mobility Forum in Berlin, was very enriching to us. So we'd like to thank you very much, you and your colleagues, on the support that you are giving also to GCCM. Now I would like to give the floor to Miss Ines and ask her about how, or ask her to tell us more about which Union for Mediterranean initiatives or program are most relevant for coastal city resilience, and what concrete forms of support are available for cities facing climate and mobility pressures. So over to you, Ines.
Okay, thank you very much.
I hope your mic is working. Perfect.
Can you hear us? Can you hear me? Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
I had some technical issues, but I'm basically in between two different programs, so I hope that it will be okay. I wanted also to share with you a presentation. Let me see if can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, just a second. I mean, if not, I will just Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so first and foremost, thank you for the invitation to be here today. So I represent the Union for the Mediterranean, and today for us is a special day because it's the Day of the Mediterranean, but it's also the day that we hosted our 10th regional forum. So just taking a step back, the UFM is an intergovernmental organization. We represent 43 member states bordering the Mediterranean, obviously. So all the EU member countries and 16 southern and eastern Mediterranean countries. And our main goal is to foster regional integration, dialogue, and cooperation in the area, and foster north-south, but also south-south and east-west cooperation in the region. So it started with the Barcelona process in 1995, then the creation of the UFM Secretariat in 2010, and today we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Barcelona process and 15th anniversary of the UFM Secretariat. We have a political forum, we have platforms for regional dialogue, and we also support regional projects. But I need to make a caveat to explain that we're not an implementing entity, meaning that the UFM is not a development bank. I mean, we're not really financing projects per se, but we're helping to originate, and mostly we're a facilitator and a convener, trying to put the relevant actors together. In terms of the Mediterranean, we know that in terms of climate action, we know that the Mediterranean is a climate hotspot. We know that it is warming 20% faster than the global average, and this has impacts at many different levels. In terms of energy and climate action, our mandate is bound by two ministerial declarations that were both signed actually in 2021. So a few years ago, and basically they outline the remit and the vision on how the 43 member states want to cooperate both on energy and on climate action to increase cooperation and share goals in the region. So that's where it stems our mandate to work in this field. And as I mentioned previously, so today actually marks the 10th regional forum. Earlier today, we had various ministers, the EU commissioner here in Barcelona to celebrate the 30 years of the Barcelona process, to celebrate our regional forum. And first and foremost, I mean, the UFM is also a diplomatic institution, meaning that when we bring the 43 member states, we bring at sectorial level, but also once a year, we have our regional forum that took place earlier today. And that is normally at Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where we as an institution take guidance on what are the most urgent issues in the region. In terms of programs that the UFM has to support coastal city resilience, as I mentioned, we're not an implementing agency, but we do work in partnership with other leading institutions. And in terms of our science policy interface, we have a cooperation and partnership with two institutions, with MEDEC, which is a network of scientists that the UFM has helped supported and has helped to create a few years ago. And we also have a partnership with Copernicus EC weather forecast, ECMWF, so the satellite system of the EU. And through both of them, we have supported coastal city resilience in different aspects. So I'm going to deep dive on that, starting with our partnership with MEDEC. So MEDEC is the network, is an independent network of experts, of scientists from the region. So from the 43 member states, it has over 700 scientists from 35 countries. It was launched in 2015. And they basically provide independent scientific assessment. So these scientists are also part of other indisputed networks like IPCC, but there was a gap to be filled, which was that the Mediterranean itself doesn't exist in climate negotiations as a region, you know. So you have the EU bloc, you have the Africa or Arab group, but the Mediterranean itself did not exist. Through the UFM, through the scientific work of MEDEC, we started to have material to analyze with a sound basis, with scientific evidence, what is happening in the region, and it was through the first Mediterranean assessment report that was released in 2020 that we actually know that the Mediterranean is warming 20% faster than the global average. After that report, there was another report that has been launched last year. It was officially released at COP29 with the UFM support, that really focused on the impacts of climate and environmental coastal risks in Mediterranean and in Mediterranean cities. So this report, again, is a technical report produced by independent scientists from the region, and it looked at what is the impact of rising temperatures, water scarcity, sea level rise, extreme weather events, and how this impact coastal risk, but also the adaptation strategies for the Mediterranean, and in the concrete case of cities. So, I mean, this is an available resource that is available now for free to anyone that is interested. I invite you to go on their website to download, because it also, I mean, it can be used in two ways. It's a science policy interface, I mean, document to help policymakers make informed decision, but it also has normally a summary for policymakers that helps translate these heavy documents into concrete and actionable steps. So on the one hand, this is one of our key priorities in terms of disseminating the best that we have in terms of science. On the other hand, we have a partnership as well with the Copernicus satellite system, with the weather forecast of the EU, where through data, and here it's more technical, so through satellite data, we make available to countries also from the southern shore the capabilities of satellite systems of the EU. And this is in terms of weather forecasts, time series. So combining the research from MEDEC and the technical aspects from the satellite systems of Copernicus, we have a strong science angle that helps our policymakers make more important and science-based decisions. So we have signed an MOU with Copernicus Satellite System in 2021. We have developed 2 apps with them up to date. One of them was precisely on the vulnerability of sea level rise on coastal cultural heritage sites in the Mediterranean. And there, the basis was analyzing the UNESCO World Heritage sites that were bordering the Mediterranean, and doing projections on how they would be impacted over, I mean, in the short term, but also like in the long term, over 50, 100 years, how they would be impacted by coastal erosion, sea level rise, and other factors. We have a concrete case of Alexandria. We had Alexandria, Venice. There are many sites that were analyzed, I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that also with them in partnership with Copernicus, ECWMF, we are in 2 weeks' time we will be having a training for researchers in Alexandria, which is a case study of this concrete study. So in Alexandria, with Biblioteca Alexandrina, we will be having a training for scientists from the region, precisely on the impacts of sea level rise on cultural heritage sites. And the reason why we chose the Alexandria was twofold, was precisely because it was one case study of this app, but also because this year it is the capital, the Mediterranean capital of culture. So we thought that based on that, it was a sound example, and it really encapsulates what we're trying to do at the UFM in terms of supporting science, technology to disseminate more informed decision making at policy level, but also making sure that at stakeholders and civil society, this information is widely available and ready to be used. So in a nutshell, that's the two key messages that I would like to leave you with. And on how concretely the UFM is supporting coastal cities and coastal communities to adapt to climate change. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much. And I would also like to take the opportunity to raise awareness to the fact that for the 4th year, we've hosted the Mediterranean Pavilion at COP. Last week, some of our partners are here, namely Interregmed, that have been with us from previous, from the first edition. So, and this is also a testament of how the UFM is trying to place climate action in global negotiations. Even though we don't have the mandate to negotiate, because we're an intergovernmental organization, we're trying to be placed in relevant fora to raise awareness and to advocate a bit for the need for climate action in the region, knowing that it's a climate hotspot. So thank you. I'll stop here. And thank you very much for the invitation and for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ines, for highlighting the role of UFM. Indeed, we understand that we don't have, like, as Mediterranean, a negotiation role. However, all the efforts that you have been doing is a step actually towards, like, having one voice for the Mediterranean and putting it on the map. So now I would like to go to Mr. Youssef Aroog and ask him, how are young people in the Mediterranean being engaged to lead climate resilience and mobility initiatives in coastal cities? And what role does MYF play in empowering youth to contribute to sustainable solutions?
Hello, Salma. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, and it's also an honor to join this webinar. I still remember our interesting panel and side event that organized by Interregmed at the your pavilion in COP29. I also keep your nice eco-friendly bottle that were handed by you. I already have prepared two recommendations that what we can do to empower youth to lead the way, but you can get this recommendation from somewhere else. What I really want to bring to the table today is a very simple question. When it comes to empowering youth, there is a question that I would like to ask to myself and to everyone here. Why we want to empower youth? If the reason behind it that we are afraid of this generation, Gen Z, they might lead the revolutions if they are not empowered. If this is the passion, if this is the motivation behind it, so we don't need it. If we want to empower youth because we have a crisis on site, we have a climate issue, we have sea level rise, we have a lot of problems happening, and we need these creative minds to bring solutions to what we want. This is also not welcomed by us as young people. This motivation is not positive. If we want to empower youth, because it's the right to be empowered, so this is what we really welcome. So the question that I want to raise, in order to empower youth, we need to take the power, right? Who is ready to give up the power so youth can go and ask? Even if we have one example in place with this country, but there are many other countries that they are not willing to give up their power so youth can take a step. Let me divide your question into two parts using this yellow mark. I thought it's more interesting to use it rather than sharing my slides. Empowering youth. Let's start by thinking what is the current situation of youth? Are they empowered now? Maybe yes, maybe no. But if yes, why we are not part of the decision-making process until now? If youth are not empowered. So do we need skills? Do we need capacity building? Do we need a non-formal education? Do we need funding only? Or we really need to be part of the decision-making process, leading the way? Let's admit one fact, that the climate crisis that we are witnessing now as a generation of young people, we are not the reason behind it. I'm 27. What I did towards the climate change, to be forced to solve it, to be creative, to find a solution, to organize a camp to clean the beach, to do advocacy and put my life at risk for politicians, to do demonstrations in COP and be affected by maybe being blocking of entering this country again and getting a visa rejection in the future. What I really did so I can contribute to the solution. Just to sum up, because I know that my time is very short, we need two main things, Salma. First, it's enough for youth engagement. It's enough for youth consultation. We need shared governance. And here it's a chance for me to recall the recommendations that were submitted by more than 100 young activists from the Euro-Mediterranean region of the Mediterranean Youth Academy that were hosted at the UFM premises in 2023. We called for a ministerial council on youth, so they can meet regularly equally to ministers of higher educations or ministers of trade or ministers of environment. The UFM took a very important step 5 years ago when launching the strategy, but who is going to implement the strategies? Vocal points who are normal employers are powerless, has nothing to say, or we really need the highest level to come together to discuss, to follow up. The second thing that we called for is establishing the advisory council on youth. Because if the UFM is deciding to spend this amount of money or to support or giving the quality label for this regional project or taking this step or do this recommendation, who is deciding that? They are deciding on our behalf. Yes, I know that they sometimes they organize events, sometimes they call us to check on opinions, but this is not sustainable. This is not governed. We are not part of the structure. We want to be part of the structure. The second recommendation is funding. I know that Martin presented Entering Next Med, and here it's a chance to highlight that they do have a good practice when they took a brave decision that I have ever seen before in a call for a proposal, when they allocated 20% of their total budget to youth projects. This is a good practice that maybe we can encourage other institutions, especially who are offering funds or are managing grant schemes like the Union for the Mediterranean, to follow the same practice. And one fact here, Salma, do you know that less than 1% of the climate funding goes to youth-led projects? And this 1% is actually after the amount were doubled. We had this webinar 2 years ago, the percentage would be 0.5%. Imagine. So this is not fair. Finally, it's very important to highlight that the Mediterranean now is getting ready for a new document that's called Pact for the Mediterranean, which is a document that represents our ambitions for the Mediterranean in the future. There is one negative part of this Pact of the Mediterranean where I felt really disappointed when I read when it comes to the monitoring and evaluation of the objectives. That was really good. They said the EU officials will do this, the European Commission will do this, senior officials will come to meet, and this will do that. And when it comes to civil society, can you expect what was the civil society role? They said civil society might or could be invited. Could be invited. This is not fair, not good phrasement. And after 30 years of the Barcelona process, are we still calling civil society and describe it as could be invited? Thank you so much, and looking forward to the Q&A in the next minutes.
Thank you very much, Youssef, for sharing your recommendations with us. And indeed, we understand that sometimes it's a bit difficult for youth to take the leadership and to be on the table actually, and to be seen what they are doing. But like from my role as a youth program coordinator, I have to say that I have seen a lot of amazing youth from all over the world doing great projects, leading their communities, trying to make positive changes. And I'm looking forward to have also a platform for Mediterranean youth at GCCM. Hopefully in the short term, and to support all the efforts of youth in the Mediterranean. As we have such an enriching set of presentations and discussions and we run out of time, unfortunately we will not be able to open the floor for Q&A today. However, please do feel free to share your questions and contact informations in the chat box, and we will make sure to convey them to our speakers after the session. So now I have to move directly to some closing remarks, and I would like to ask Dr. Andrea if you would like to say anything at the end before we close the webinar.
Thank you. No, so as you say, it's late on a Friday. I know several people, including panelists, have other commitments, but so we're very glad there was such an active participation. Please do contact us in writing, and we're happy to convey your questions. And next time we'll probably accommodate for a longer time. This is it's the second webinar that we're doing. So we're learning. We will need 75 or 90 minutes. Thanks, everyone. Please follow us on social media, as I see was mentioned in the chat, because we will continue having quarterly webinars. And so we'll have one in the first quarter of 2026, and we'll do this beyond. Thanks, everybody, the panelists, the audience, for your attention. And please get in touch for any questions, suggestions, recommendations, including if there are topics that you would like us to cover that are related to climate mobility, sea level rise, coastal resilience, and cities. Get in touch, and we'll be happy to have your suggestions. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.